10 years from today, Lisa Schneider will trade in her office job to become the leader of a pack of dogs. As the owner of her own dog rescue, that is. A second act made possible by the reskilling courses Lisa's taking now with AARP to help make sure her income lives as long as she does. And she can finally run with the big dogs. And the small dogs, who just think they're big dogs. That's why the younger you are, the more you need AARP. Learn more at aarp.org/skills.
Why does every recipe I try need 18 ingredients, including a jar of something paste I'll never use again, but will sit in my fridge for 9 months? I just want dinner in the oven, fast. That's why I love Blue Apron's new one-pan assemble and bake meals. They send you fresh ingredients that are already chopped. All you do is put it all together and bake. That's it. No chopping, no weird leftovers, just delicious, easy-to-make meals. Get 20% off your first 2 orders with code APRON20. Terms and conditions apply. Visit blueapron.com/terms for more.
Hello everyone and welcome to How Are the Podcast. It's Gav and you join us for a news update. Now normally we would save these for a Saturday when things have quietened off a little bit. But for some reason on Wednesday afternoon, Sunderland decided to go a bit mental and loads went off it. So we thought, well, we'll get together, we'll chat about what's gone on because since the last pod we did, as I said at the end of the last pod, loads will have happened by the time you next hear from us. Well, here we are. Loads has happened. So, joining me tonight, first up, we've got Bomber with us. Hello, mate.
Good afternoon, good evening. Hello, Gav. You okay?
I am very good, mate. And also with us, Johnny Hawley. Hello, mate.
Good afternoon, good evening, etc. Little peek behind the curtain from Bomber there, because I think this is going out in the morning, isn't it?
Oh, wow.
Yeah, just it's afternoon, morning, evening somewhere, isn't it? Sunderland are all around the world, so it's afternoon, morning, evening.
Yeah, you don't know what time zone I'm in, Johnny.
True. As I always say when I have a pint, it's 5 o'clock somewhere. So
yeah, well, I'm on West Coast USA time. I'm in LA currently. So yeah.
Are you being subbed by Sunderland to do scouting and recruitment?
Yeah, they've read a couple of the Transfer Tuesday articles, and they've flown me out to try and get the scoop on some of the MLS signings that might potentially be coming about.
Aye. I mean, I kind of kidded before we came on. There's not much to talk about, lads, is there? I mean, freaking hell. What has gone on? We are definitely the story of this window so far. I think everybody must be looking at Sunderland and thinking, Jesus, they are going for it. Because it's not just players, but it's off-the-field stuff, it's staff, it's just, there's so much that you can't keep up. I mean, when I was recording the podcast with James Copley, there was loads of things happening while we were recording. And I just think this is going to be another mad 2 months, isn't it? We've got so much to talk about today. And I can guarantee you by this time tomorrow, because we are just, again, a peek behind the curtain, it's actually quite late on Wednesday night when we're recording this. But by the time, this goes out in the morning, I imagine more will have happened. It's been mental, hasn't it? I mean, we'll kick off with what I would say is the big one, because it kind of and everything from this point filters down from this story. And it's something we've actually discussed a few times already. But the confirmation came that Florent Ghisolfi is indeed Sunderland's new director of football. The club announced it officially on Wednesday afternoon. Something I guess nobody can be surprised by, because we were made aware of this last week. We've even heard in the foreign media that he's been present at the medicals of the players that have been having medicals in Paris and elsewhere. So he's very much got his feet under the table. He's working. You can see his influence slapped all over the majority of these deals, which we will come on to. But we'll talk specifically just about this confirmation, and I'll come to you, Bomber, after I've read the little bit of spiel that Ghisolfi and, interestingly, Kirill Louis-Dreyfus, no Christian Speakman, on the official statement from the club. And Ghisolfi, his first words as director of football of Sunderland, said, "The club, players, staff and supporters achieved an amazing result last season. Together, these people brought Sunderland back to the Premier League, and I'm strongly determined to bring my experience and support this group to ensure the squad is ready to take the next step. This is an exciting challenge, and I'm looking forward to working alongside Kirill, Christian and Regis as we enjoy this exciting new chapter in Sunderland's history alongside our fans. And Kirill Louis-Dreyfus added, we have been on an incredible journey over the last 4 years, and we now face a new challenge as we prepare for life in the Premier League. The appointment of Florent marks an exciting new chapter in that history. Or journey, sorry. I can't even read. It's late. Let us off. This appointment enhances our capabilities in line with the club's long-term vision, and evolving our leadership structure in this way reflects our continued commitment to building a sustainable and competitive football club. I'm confident that players, staff and fans alike will join me in welcoming Florent to Sunderland and supporting him in his new role. And I got through that with about 5 mistakes, so I did quite well there, Bomber. So yeah, I mean, very much what you would expect when somebody first takes up post. But we've got that confirmation. It's took, like I say, probably a week and a half since we first got the story. But just nice to know that it's done, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I was on with Chris last week, maybe, when we were talking about it. And it's a good thing to have over the line. Again, as with many of whether it's a piece of the puzzle in the backroom staff or it's a new signing on the pitch, we tend to be looking at all of these on paper. And on paper, considering who else was interested in, well, firstly, where he's come from. Secondly, who else was interested in bringing him into the backroom staff. So it feels like a bit of a coup. You mentioned about Louis-Dreyfus being the one kind of announcing it over Speakman. I wouldn't read too much in that for me personally. I again said on the last time I was on talking about it, I think it's very much that they are, if you're thinking of a structural hierarchy, I think they're probably on the same level. And Speakman will be doing a lot of the local stuff, a lot of the stuff in and around the Premier League and the development of the youngsters coming through. Whereas Ghisolfi is very much our man on the continent, knows a lot of European football inside out. It wouldn't even surprise me. Again, I said before, it wouldn't surprise me if he was kept himself out in Europe and based himself in Europe and almost had like a remote role out there. And I think it's telling that we announce his signing, and then all of a sudden a load of dominoes seem to fall, and all of a sudden we're throwing money here, there, and everywhere, predominantly at Strasbourg, it seems. But yeah, it's although at least the French league. So yeah, it's really exciting. I'll just reiterate what I said before. I think it's a very bold move. It's a very astute move. And it's a real signal of intent, I think, from the upper echelons of the football club.
Yeah, you can shoot us down here, Johnny, if you want, but this is something I've been thinking about today. And he's rubbing his hands together. But I don't know if this is harsh to say or not, but I think it's fair to say that Speakman's strength is not in European recruitment. I think the record's very patchy of recruiting players from abroad in the Championship. But certainly you can see his strengths as a sporting director and in doing what he's done up to this point. I mean, a fantastic job that he's done. So when you think about it, it makes sense, this, doesn't it? To bring in a proper expert in European football who's coveted by numerous football clubs. And let's not forget, one of those was Newcastle United, as reported by The Athletic. Just want to get that jibe in there. But no, teams in the Champions League, Juventus was another one that were named, and he left Roma to come to Sunderland. I just think this is such an exciting move. I think in years to come, this will be looked upon as a really significant appointment in our club's history, because really it's the first time we've looked properly serious, like really serious as an outfit. And I even think about when, going back even further, when Reedy was in charge, it wasn't like this, was it? This is very different. This feels like Sunderland are doing something which takes us up several levels, not just one level. And Ghisolfi is the head of that. I think you've got to really look at this as something which is very, very exciting.
Yeah, I'm disappointed not to be able to slag you off here, because I actually agree with basically every word you said. I think, yeah, it's a really exciting appointment, isn't it? And I also just want to echo what Bomber was saying as well. I mean, I think it makes perfect sense, doesn't it, to have somebody in post who, like you say, might even just stay out in Europe and just be kind of our feet on the ground and eyes and ears on the continent, who is going to be, striking those deals and establishing the contacts and, fielding the calls from the agents and all that, all that kind of day-to-day stuff that goes into the transfers that obviously we don't see. We just kind of see the flashy unveilings at the end of it. But when I was reading the club statement before, something that kind of stuck out to me was I was, looking at the wording, I think, and there's a few bits that interested me, which is twice they mention evolution. One is near the top. It's the 40-year-old's appointment represents an organic evolution of SAFC's long-term strategy. And later on, Kirill says something about how we're evolving our leadership structure. So I think it's interesting that they are seemingly trying to put a point on the fact that, like, this isn't a break from what we've been doing. This is a natural next step, and it is something that clearly has kind of been on the cards, you'd imagine, in those conversations between Kirill and Speakman and the other figures behind the scenes as the club have geared up towards and then achieved promotion. I think it is clear to see, I think, and I think I've made this point before, that, this is going to have been something that the club have been looking at doing. It hasn't just been, oh, right, we're in the Premier League, what do we do now? Oh, we should get a director of football. Nothing that these lot do is ever in the moment, is it? It's all very considered and very, very thorough. And the other thing is, Ghisolfi himself in his quote makes specific mention of saying, I'm looking forward to working alongside Kirill, Christian and Regis. So again, like, emphasizing this isn't ousting Speakman. This isn't, a total shake-up of what's going on. It's very much, an appointment where Ghisolfi is to come in, slot into the existing structure. Yes, there's going to be, change of responsibilities and things are going to be a bit different. And again, to circle back to what you were saying, Gav, I think it is clear that the Christian Speakman's big kind of the reason he's such a valuable asset for us is what he does internally and kind of within Britain as well. Like, he's clearly got a lot of knowledge of the youth kind of landscape, as it were, in this country, and he's got a keen eye for a prospect, and he's got some contact as well. Obviously, he's partly the reason why we ended up getting Joe Bellingham. So I think it makes perfect sense for him to focus on the aspects of the job that are right up his street, because you wouldn't expect Christian Speakman to be a seasoned operator at the top level of European football. Like, he's never been there, whereas Ghisolfi has, like you say, coveted by some top clubs and come to us from Roma. So yeah, I think it makes perfect sense, and I do think it's an exciting appointment, and I hope you're right, and we are looking back on this in a few years' time and saying, like, that was where it all started. Because you think back to our previous attempts at bringing in directors of football, and you've got names like Lee Congerton and Roberto Di Fanti, which don't inspire such positive memories. So,
do you know what it is though? When you think about those appointments, there wasn't already a structure in place for them to come into. So we were hiring people to basically, we were going like, "There's the keys, there you go. You drive this shit show and see where it heads." Like, very, very different set of circumstances.
It was almost like we didn't know what we were doing, but other clubs are bringing in technical directors and directors of football, so we should do the same. We've got no idea what one is or what they need to do, but yeah, we'll bring one in. But we a lot more mature and a lot more grown up about it. And again, just to echo what Jonny was saying, if this was a business outside of football that has seen the growth that Sunderland has, going from League One to Championship to Premiership, if you equate that growth from a business sense, of course you're going to expand out your top level directors and your leadership as you expand out into Europe and into other markets. You're going to bring experts from those markets in, and this is just exactly the same, but just in football terms.
It's funny because football traditionally, the structure of the football inside of the operation is traditionally not structured like a typical business. Like, in virtually every place of work, you have the CEO runs the show. Then under him, you've got, the board, and they all have their own scope, and then their own people working for them. And that sort of structure is generally not bottomed out in football. It's always, traditionally, it's been owner, manager, maybe chief scout, and that's it, And there's no real flow through. And all of a sudden, Sunderland are kind of operating as a football and business now. Does that make sense? Like, we're actually even down to how we hire these people. So, like, you think of Regis Labry's two assistants who were already at the club, Pedro and Ali Bartarini. They they got those jobs after an interview process. They weren't like, wasn't jobs for the boys who already knows them, this type of crack. They were interviewed for the job. It just feels like on that side of the club, we're actually doing things properly now. And I suppose over the long term, as moving parts change and, Regis might leave at some point, or we might have coaches poached away. I mean, we've just lost a goalkeeper coach, went back to MK Dons. It was only a short-term deal, but you know what I mean? Like, he's left the club, someone else will step in there, and it's just, it's simple structure, isn't it? And I think, but Ghisolfi, and when you're in the Championship, you don't need a director of football on the continent, because primarily your recruitment isn't being done, or certainly the level of deals aren't being done on the continent that we're now doing, because we have Premier League money behind us. So you can, to a degree, understand why they've waited for this. But it's exciting, and it's allowed us to get excited about transfers, because we'll move on to this, because we're being linked with virtually every player in Europe, it seems. I think Andy's list is top of 90 now, which is every day it's like another 10 players are being added to this list.
All you need to do is you need to look at whoever Leeds are rumoured to be about to sign. That's who we're going to be in for.
Yeah,
so, exactly. Bomber, you can ignore all your Transfer Tuesday links. Just get on the Leeds forums and just scrape that. You'll be fine.
Yeah. You must be loving it, Johnny, being around them. There's one Leeds fan at work, and I've been rubbing it in a bit today, like, say, we're signing someone else here after, and but it's.
I'll let them come to me with the Diarra stuff in the office. I'll be honest, I wasn't going to broach it, but if they bring it up, I'll log it over them.
But what's interesting is that the two transfer links we've seen today came out of absolutely nowhere. Nobody saw them coming. And in particular, the one for Noah Sadiki, because that deal is done. He's had his medical, the terms are agreed, 5-year contract, fees agreed with his club. Nobody saw it coming. That should teach you something quite valuable, is that Sunderland, on the face of it, you might think what they're doing, or, You might see transfer rumours popping up on social media, and you might think, we've missed out on that player. Bloody hell, he's went there instead of here. Hey, we're doing business in the shadows. We'll be talking to players now, and we'll be close on players now who we've not even heard of.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting, isn't it, Bomber, that we're doing it that way, because people do see what happens on social media, and they get carried away. But look, the club they've got quite a pragmatic approach to these things, and we'll be way down the line on discussions with players like Sadiki, who we've been talking to for probably months now.
Yeah, I think there's an element probably that Ghisolfi's contract and announcement was the precursor to a lot of this, because I think he's probably been doing an awful lot of work in the background. I don't want to necessarily use the phrase tapping people up, because that obviously that's a dark art in football, but in the loosest sense of the word, he's probably been on the phone to agents and to these players. He's probably spoken to Noah Sadiki and his agent and been like, look, it's for all intents and purposes, I'm going to be coming to Sunderland. This is the project. I'd like you to come along with me or consider it. And now that but obviously he can't do anything officially until he's officially, a Sunderland employee. And now that that's, signed, sealed, delivered, all of a sudden some of these kind of secret conversations that he's having that have not been possible to be leaked out to journalists or to social media sources, because they're private conversations that he's having not yet as an employee of Sunderland, all of a sudden are coming out the woodwork. Noah Sadiki is one that has completely eluded me on any of my forays into the Transfer Tuesday writings, and all of a sudden it's signed, sealed, delivered, and we all know, we're not naive to think that transfers of that magnitude of cross-continent transfers happen within 12 hours. This is something that's been going on for days and possibly weeks, and I don't think it's a coincidence that Ghisolfi's been announced, and then all of a sudden these other transfers are either done, or Romano's saying that they're about to be done. It's signed, sealed. It just needs to be announced, and the T's crossed and the I's dotted. But it's the most exciting way to go about your transfer business, isn't it? Rather than those long, drawn out, will they, won't they? Is it going to be this player? Are they going to go to Leeds, Burnley, Newcastle, Middlesbrough? Oh no, they might come to us. When all of a sudden, bang, just out of nowhere, scarf pick. That's what we all love to see, really, isn't it?
Yeah. In case you've been living under a rock, Noah Sadiki, he is a central defensive midfield player, 20-year-old or 21-year-old. I don't have his age written
20.
down, but I think he's 20, so very, very young. He's just won the Jupiler Pro League with Union Saint-Galloise. That's how it's pronounced, I'm told. That was my very Flemish pronunciation of that.
Perfect, mate.
Yeah. I want all the French listeners to get in touch and tell me how good that was, because I'm getting better. They won the Jupiler League. Fabrizio Romano was the first journalist to report it as an exclusive. Some degree deal to sign Noah Sadiki from Union Saint-Galloise. Here we go. We'll keep doing that. Sounds great. Agreement done and medical done this morning. Contract valid until June 2030. The transfer fee is €17 million plus 3 million in add-ons. And as Johnny alluded to before, Leeds have been tracking him. And there was a screenshot of a piece going around, which has just kind of rubbed salt in the wounds for Leeds fans, because there was a piece kind of hyping him as a better player than Habib Diarra, who they just missed out on to us. So they were getting all carried away thinking they were going to sign this guy, and we've signed him too. So I think Leeds fans probably hate us right now. But yeah, that deal was broken by Fabrizio Romano. There were also stories in the I think in the Belgian media about the fact that Ghisolfi was at the medical in Paris. So he's a Congo international. As I said before, he's a holding midfield player who can also play right back, and I think played a couple of games at centre half. But he's not the biggest by the looks of it, but a very athletic, a similar type player to Job apparently, but a bit more quick. Don't know a great deal about him. Well, that's it. I'm going to get the actual lowdown from a proper expert on that tomorrow. So we will have a pod out in the coming days, giving you a bit more detail on who he is, what he can do, what his background is. But Johnny, you'll have seen the same stuff I've seen on social media about him. People really, really hyping up this signing, who watch him, who know who he is, talking about how I've seen so many of these analysts and scouts on Twitter basically saying he's Premier League ready already. I guess time will tell on that front. But isn't it exciting to just be talking about this sort of stuff? It was someone retweeted something the other day, and it was like 4 years since we signed Danny Graham. Like,
Christ.
5 years since we signed Callum McFadden. Oh, and I was just like, God, isn't it nice, this?
Yeah.
it's what it makes you all feel all warm and fuzzy. He could be shite for all I care. I'm just enjoying this part.
Aye, exactly. Well, do you know what as well? It creeps up on you, actually, because I was just thinking, like, at the end of next season, it'll be as many seasons since we were in League One as the amount of seasons we spent in League One, which feels to me like quite a bit, and it feels like quite a statement for that to be in the Premier League. We'll reach that milestone, you know what I mean? Which is a bit of a pathetic milestone, really, but I'm still going to be happy about it. But yeah, like the fact that we're 3 years removed from League One and we're talking about €20 million signings coming in who are being rated as, some of the best midfield prospects across Europe, and we're beating, other teams to the signings and kind of, pipping in at the last minute. It's all brilliant. It's exciting as anything, isn't it? Like, I'm sure fans of other teams, particularly teams who've been in the Premier League for a while at this point, will kind of look at us getting excited and be like, I remember my first Premier League transfer window as well. Like, it's not all sunshine and rainbows, no matter how many zeros are on the end of the fees. But yeah, it's brilliant to see. And I mean, do I know anything about Noah Sadiki? No. Like, did I know who he was before this morning? No. But from the little that I have looked at, I mean, just in terms of like experience, because I think I can't evaluate his quality, but yes, he's only 20 years old, but he's made 9 international appearances. He has won the Belgian Pro League. He's won the Belgian Cup. He's won the Belgian Super Cup. So to quibble about the standard of the country's divisions, but they're major honours in the top level of the country he was in. He's already made 76 league appearances for the Saint-Galloise. Sorry to show you up there, Gav, but hurt me physically inside here, and you try and say
feels nice, man. Just say it.
But yeah, so he's made over 3/4 of a century worth of league appearances at the top level in Belgium. He's won trophies. He's played internationally. So he's not going to turn up to Sunderland and be overawed by the size of the task or the size of the club. Like, yes, I'm sure it'll be a new one for him playing in front of this many fans every week and stuff like that, because and playing in the Premier League, because it is going to be outside of his kind of wheelhouse at this point. But I think he will be much more equipped to deal with the rigours of the coming season than a number of the current squad, which is no slight on them. They're just not at the level that they've experienced this yet, whereas obviously this lad has. So whether he's any good or not, I think certainly in terms of the intangibles that you can account for and that you can measure, insofar as you can, I think he ticks a lot of boxes. Similar to Diarra, really, in that kind of looking at his CV almost. I think he has a lot of things that we don't currently have, which is always a good thing. And I think it just shows the recruitment team have got the head screwed on, so I'm pleased with it.
Well, don't forget as well, Johnny, if you look down at his levels of experience, and this seems to be something that we seem to be doing as well, is we're bringing in people who are, not just skilled and experienced in the league with which they are playing in. Noah Sadiki, he's played Conference League, he's played Europa League, and what I've tended to do, I did the same with Diarra, is to kind of dispel the can they do it in the Premier League. I look to see if they've got European experience, and if that European experience is against English clubs. And he's played in the Europa League at Anfield. He's played in the Europa League against Liverpool at home in the Europa League and a 2-1 victory against Liverpool as well. He's played against West Ham in the Conference League, so he's got a little bit of experience of performing relatively well against English clubs, which settles my nerves when people start raising questions, can they do it in the Premier League? Obviously, there's no guarantees, but it's just the thing that is most exciting for me is that we're getting young players in who, all right, they're unknowns to us from across the continent, but they have played however many Champions League games, Europa League games, Conference League games, and that is a measure of I think at the moment, that is the yardstick with which we measure the signings. When was the last time we signed somebody with Champions League experience and a good pedigree in the Champions League or good pedigree in the Europa League? And that's what makes me more excited and more confident that they'll come over and hit the ground running.
Yeah, I mean, that is a great point, actually, because something that I've banged on about for ages, privately as well, like just having conversations with people. Everyone talks about, Premier League experience. We need Premier League experience in this squad. Yeah, that would be great. But just having played in the Premier League before doesn't make you any good. If you think the last good Premier League transfer window we had was probably the January under Big Sam. So we signed Kirchhoff, we signed Kone, we signed Kazri, who all hit the ground running. Kirchhoff's first game was terrible, but barring that, he hit the ground running. They were all instrumental in us staying up. Not one of them had played in the Premier League before, whereas we signed people under David Moyes who played hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of Premier League games. The problem was they were all horrific by the time we signed them. So yeah, it is a great point to bring up, Bomber, because it's going to be...
the problem that you've got is that if you're insisting that you get Premier League experience, the only people that you're going to be able to pick up are people that clearly weren't good enough to play in the Premier League because they're from relegated teams, or players from teams that you want to be competing with that are deemed no longer good enough for that team, and therefore you're automatically making yourself weaker than that team that you're competing against by taking their lesser players. So it's totally counterintuitive. It's what I'd much rather do what we're doing, 100%.
I think it's also interesting in Sadiki's case, for instance, playing for the club who are co-owned basically by Brighton, the sister club of Brighton. So he'll be on their radar. I did read something about Brentford being interested in him this summer. So we're looking at players who are on the radars of clubs who are a level above us at the minute. I know I mentioned Leeds before, who are obviously coming into the league in the same position we are. But, we're looking at young players who are really highly rated and are probably at a stage, it's certainly in the case of Sadiki and Diarra, where they're probably a year or two off those other clubs considering them. Maybe I can imagine in the case of Sadiki and Diarra, if after a year and a half, they're absolutely smashing it at Sunderland, that's when the big boys will start coming, because they'll
70 million, same as what they've done to less players. I think it's interesting that you mentioned the two clubs that you mentioned, Brighton and Brentford. We're beating them to certain players, and that if we're being perfectly honest, those are the two clubs that we probably aspire to be exactly like. Developing young, selling them on for a profit. They invented the model in the Premier League that we are aspiring to be. So if we're already beating them to prospects, and competing with them, all the more for it.
Yeah. Moving on slightly, the other story which broke around sort of mid-afternoon on Wednesday was that of Djordje Petrovic from Chelsea. Serbian goalkeeper, 25-year-old. I think it was first broke by a foreign journalist, then backed up by several domestic journalists. However, they poured a little bit of cold water on it because I think the foreign journalist got a bit carried away and it basically said it was all done and he was going to Sunderland. And then Keith Downey and a couple of other of the journalists from the top publications sort of reported the story but said it's not quite there yet, don't get too carried away. Keith Downey tweeted, Sunderland have made an inquiry to Chelsea over a move for goalkeeper Djordje Petrovic, but face competition from Bournemouth. Newly promoted Sunderland are hopeful of completing the deal, with Chelsea valuing him 25 million. The deal is not yet advanced, and other clubs in Europe are also keeping tabs on the situation. Then he mentions the fact we've missed out on Marcin Bulka, which we haven't actually talked about. But that one sort of fell through also on Wednesday because he opted to take 160 grand a week from Saudi Arabia, tax free, which I can't understand why you would want to do that. And that story's been widely reported now. Now, Djordje Petrovic is someone who was again on nobody's radar until that name dropped through today. Someone who's actually impressed me before I've watched him. He's a good goalkeeper. I was reading some of the comments from Chelsea fans, and they're absolutely outraged at the fact that they could be letting him come to us. They've got about 8 goalkeepers. I think there's a problem with Chelsea. They need to sell some of them. But he played quite a bit of football season before last, didn't he, for Chelsea in the Premier League, and did really well. And then they bought in another 2 keepers last year, I think, and replaced him. So he went out on loan to their sister club, Strasbourg, who are obviously, quite topical at the minute, given we've just signed their captain. And he had a season out on loan there, and I think he won the Player of the Year. So he won Strasbourg's Player of the Year. He's obviously a top goalkeeper. We're moving on quickly from Marcin Bulka. Looking at this guy, I'd be really excited by this one, Johnny, if we could pull this off. I mean, we're talking about another top-level player that we're targeting. If we could get him through, I think that would be such a statement.
Oh, it would certainly be a statement. I mean, I'll be honest, I was a little bit ignorant of actually how good he is at first. When the link first dropped, I was just kind of lazily in my head. I just remembered a couple of seasons ago seeing him have a couple of games for Chelsea, and Chelsea weren't great at that point. Obviously they were still in the midst of the blue £1 billion bottle jobs phase, as Gary Neville coined it. But I looked at actually what he's done over the past couple of seasons, and you're right. He won the Supporters Player of the Season for Strasbourg last season, and I think he was actually nominated for the Ligue 1 Goalkeeper of the Season award as well for the whole division, which he didn't win. I can't remember the name of the lad who did win it. I did check this before, but he was nominated for that as well. So obviously he impressed last season. I think that goes without saying. Even the season before for Chelsea, like I say, I mean, I had vague memories, but I think he played 23 times in the Premier League. And again, as you say, Chelsea have about 8 keepers. So you don't get 23 league games for a team with 7 other options if you haven't got something about you. So that, I think, alone tells you that he's obviously got the pedigree. He was impressive in MLS even before he went to Chelsea. I think it's a big statement, isn't it, that we can attract a player who you would imagine would have plenty of opportunities. If it's true that he's up for sale, which it seems like he probably is, like you say, Chelsea probably need to shift a couple. This interest in the reported bids wouldn't be happening if there hadn't been indication from Chelsea that he can go. Somebody like him who wouldn't have cost Chelsea nothing when they signed him. Has had a couple of seasons where he's been playing football. He's had some accolades. And Strasbourg qualified for Europe, didn't they? I think they qualified for the Conference League for next season. Don't quote us on that, but they had a good season, so he will be a name that's on plenty of people's lists. He's obviously had a great season. He will be on the radars of plenty of clubs. So for us to be potentially in the running for being, the top of that tree, possibly to sign him, I mean, obviously if Bournemouth come in with a concrete offer, it might be a different proposition, and they have just lost Kepa, who obviously went back to Chelsea and then has gone to Arsenal now, so they'll need a keeper. But for us to be near the top of that list and to be one at this stage, I think it speaks volumes to how we're viewed in the kind of football ecosystem. I think you've made this point a few times recently, Gav, as well, about how the wider view of Sunderland has changed a lot over the past couple of years, and it's something that probably a lot of the fan base haven't really kind of come to terms with, in a sense, which is that we are actually viewed as an elite destination for a lot of really talented young footballers across the continent. The work that we've done, and obviously Speakman kind of being the figurehead of that process, what we've done with Joe Bellingham, Jack Clark, Ross Stewart, the list is potentially endless over the next few seasons of the players we already have who make those steps up. That translates into real sort of concrete effects for the club down the line. And it's why following the model is so important, because now look at it, we're potentially chucking 25 million on a goalkeeper who is massively on the rise in European football. We've already broke our transfer record twice. All of this is possible because of the work that we did laying nations in League One and the Championship, and then the effect that's had on us in terms of reputation across the continent and making us back into a major player as soon as we've got back to the top table. It makes you excited, not just for the, obviously, a load of signings and money being chucked around is all great and it's brilliant in the moment. But for me, it's the thought of, if we do get this right and we stay up, another year, another 2 years of this, another 5 years of this, God knows where we might be. So it's brilliant times. And I think this is just another one of those links that, assuming there's something in it, I think everything's just trending in the right direction. So I'm chuffed with it.
Yeah, it would be a big statement, wouldn't it, Bomber, if we go out and get because it looks like we're not just looking for any old goalkeeper. I mean, poor Anthony Patterson, he's done so well for us. But you're talking about a level up, aren't you? Like,
yeah.
Without even watching Marcin Bulka, to see the fact that he, statistically, one of the top rated goalkeepers in the top 5 divisions last season. And then again, Petrovic, player of the season in the league earned team, coming from Chelsea, 25 million quid. We're like, we're looking at a rung up from Patterson, aren't we? And it's important, I think, when you do get to the Premier League, that you focus very heavily on core of your team, that the goalkeeper, centre half, centre mids, the striker, the spine of the squad. And that's clearly what we're doing, right? I mean, Petrovic, we might not get him. We are going to sign a goalkeeper of that calibre because we've got the money there. You're not putting down 25 millions and stuff if you're not committed to strengthening that position.
Well, if you look at the 2 goalkeepers that we've come close to signing or are interested in, Petrovic and I forget his name, the Polish lad, they are all right. They might not be first.
Marcin Bulka. I called him Bulka the other day on the podcast, which was good.
But you're right. And for all Sunderland fans, we love Anthony Patterson. We love his rise throughout the club. And this is no disrespect to him whatsoever. I think he still deserves the chance, and I think there still probably is a Premier League goalkeeper in there. But I think with Sunderland this season coming, we can't afford to find out this season whether he is or not. We need somebody who we're pretty certain is going to be at that level. And both of the goalkeepers that we've, willing to spend 25 million euros on are that. All right, they might not necessarily be first choice for their respective countries, but they have international experience, which Anthony Patterson doesn't, apart from at under 21 level or under 19s level, whatever it was, which in itself speaks volumes. Petrovic, I think he's conceded 1 goal in his last 4 appearances for Serbia. So and I think he's got like 8-9 Premier League clean sheets. So if we're talking about stats and levels, there's quite clearly a gulf there. I still hope and pray that there is a place for Anthony Patterson, because it would be really harsh for him to have made that journey with us and then just be left out in the cold. And I think there probably is a place for him. But hopefully whoever we bring in is going to be objectively a better quality than he currently is at. And it might kick him on, give him that competition, because let's be honest, he's not really had any competition for his place in the starting lineup for the last, 3 years, maybe. And maybe has got a little bit stale in his development because of that, for that reason. So hopefully it brings him on, and we end up with 2 world-class goalkeepers that in the Premier League for years to come. So, but it's definitely the right move.
Yeah,
I mean, sorry, not to derail us too much, because I know we've got loads to talk about, but just on that Patterson point, I think that's potentially a problem that we're going to have to solve. And it's a problem that we're almost making for ourselves, but we have to, because I agree we need to sign a level up of keeper, but look at what happened at Arsenal when they brought David Raya in and still had Aaron Ramsdale knocking about the place. Like, every time a goalkeeper lets in a goal, the camera pans to the lad who sat on the bench. Every post-match interview, if somebody's made a mistake, if you've got beat, it's, oh, well, what's happening with the goalkeeper situation? The columns, Jamie Carragher and Gary Neville banging on about on Monday Night Football. That's the world that we're going to be in this season. Now, yes, we're not Arsenal, so we're not going to be talked about to quite as much of a, the same degree, but I just worry if Patterson is to stay around the club, which, I don't begrudge him. I like him. I think he's a good player, but, do we open ourselves up to the risk of that, like, becoming a bit of a pantomime is all I fear. So I just wonder whether we need to think about what to do with him.
I think I think you're absolutely right, Johnny, but I think there's a slight caveat in that I don't think for 1 minute Regis Labrise is going to come out and say that he's got 2 number 1 goalkeepers and he's going to rotate them. And I think it's the money that's involved, I think, is a very clear statement of intent that we are bringing in a number 1 goalkeeper. But your point is absolutely valid, is Anthony Patterson going to accept being a number 1 goalkeeper in League One and the Championship, and then possibly felt like he's been frozen out for a new goalkeeper now that we're back in the big time. So there are similarities, but I don't think Labrise is going to make a rod for his own back in the same way that Arteta did, because that's why it became a problem, and that's why the camera was panning, because every time a mistake made or every time a goal went in. But it'll be interesting. Like I say, I hope it's something that he accepts and kicks on and really wants to thrive and grow as a goalkeeper and really challenge for that number 1 spot.
Yeah. Moving along slightly, since we've got a few more bits to go through before we check out. Fabrizio Romano was at it again, reporting on Sunderland on around about the same time he broke all of these stories, actually. And his tweet said, former Milan and Al Nassr assistant coach Luciano Vulcano has agreed to join Sunderland. Vulcano will sign in as a first-team assistant coach, wanted by Regis Labrise already 1 year ago. Despite being approached to be a first, I think he means despite being approached to be a first-team coach, Vulcano set to join Sunderland to try and help their Premier League chapter. Another curveball. Was not expecting this, but as we were talking about before, when you get promoted, your structure has to change. We're going to have a bigger squad probably. We're going to need more coaches. We're going to need more experience. So this one is not surprising in the slightest, because when you think about it, we've lost Mike Dodds, we lost the goalie coach, which meant that I think Alessandro Bacciarini, he stepped up, didn't he, into basically the role this guy's taken. And I would imagine he's going to come back down, be back in charge of the goalkeepers. That's left the space to fill. So yeah, another assistant coming in. Can't say I know a great deal about this fella, although the fact that he's worked for Milan, worked for Al Nassr in Saudi Arabia. I think I can't remember the name of the coach who he apparently worked with.
Stefano Pioli.
There he is.
There he is.
Top Italian coach who I know loads about, clearly. But he's also, previous to that, worked at Fiorentina and Inter Milan, possibly under the same guy. I think it was actually.
It is, Gav, yeah. He's like followed him around from Inter to Fiorentina to AC Milan and now to Al Nassr, yeah. Yeah,
and obviously not to Sunderland, so this is his first break away from that fella. But again, another fairly young 37-year-old, which is young for a coach. Just quickly on this, Bomber, I guess, not entirely surprising, I guess, that we went out there and hired a best-in-class coach. It feels a bit like Football Manager, doesn't it, when you're hiring coaches and you just kind of filter them by kind of, the highest attributes. Oh, this fella will do.
He's got 5 stars, so we want him in.
Yeah, that's it.
I mean, you can't really tell. It's difficult with coaches, isn't it? You can't look at a highlight reel of a coach and go, "Oh, they look good." But the fact that Pioli has brought him along wherever he's gone, he's obviously highly valued, and into Fiorentina, AC Milan, not the smallest clubs in the world that he's worked at. Obviously followed him out to Saudi, and has possibly had enough of Saudi and wants to break away from underneath Pioli. But on the face of it, it looks another very shrewd bit of business. And again, I keep saying it, and I keep having to pinch myself. Just the fact that Sunderland is now once again, if you think when wasn't that long ago, we were going to Walsall and Cheltenham and all the likes, and we were synonymous with those teams in League One, and now we're being talked about in the same breath as AC Milan and Fiorentina and Inter and all those big European clubs that I didn't really know when or if we'd ever be talked about in the same breath as those ever again. It's just fucking mad, and it's awesome. I love it.
Interestingly as well, Johnny, that there was a mention there of the fact that he had opportunities as a first-team coach and chose to do this. Again, speaks to the pull of the club now,
Yeah.
And also the fact that Regis Lebris apparently wanted him a year ago, so this goes back a while. It's all starting to link together. You hear these things, and even Ghisolfi, I'm pretty sure they'll know each other from working in Italian football. But another character who has crossed paths with Red Lebris at some point. It's funny, isn't it?
It's almost like the start of a heist movie where they do the getting the crew together, and it's like, oh, I've got to call in some old favours and get the band back together. It's like that's what Reggie's doing. You know what I mean? He's just going, right, who are all the players across Europe who I've had and I think are going to be class? Let's get all them in. Kirill's going, right, who are all the lads across Europe in the recruitment side who've ever spoke to each other before? Can we get them in? And then that's the montage, and then the season's going to kick in when the action starts, you know what I mean? And we're going and stealing 3 points from the Etihad and stuff. But no, I mean, that awful crack to one side. I think you're right about the fact that it does feel very much like stuff's coming together, rather than disparate, separate appointments that could still be, good appointments in their own right. Feels very joined up and very much like there's an overarching sort of idea going on, which I think
it feels very deliberate, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. That's the word, isn't it? Deliberate. Nothing is done without serious consideration and serious thought. And there's a clear reason behind everything that they're doing, which I think is it's a lovely thing to be able to say. And yeah, like Bomber said, the names that are in the reports of stuff that we're being linked with, the ex-clubs of these coaches and these players, and it's just brilliant, isn't it? I think it shows, and it shows as well that the ambitions of the ownership and Speakman and Ghisolfi now, who's obviously going to be part of the operation, they're aiming very, very high, because I think the worst thing we could have done is come up and gone, right, what do we think we need to finish 17th? Let's try and get that. Because then if you get anything wrong, you're done. And I mean, even with the business that we're doing, we all think it's brilliant. It could still go wrong and we might get relegated. But at least if we're aiming to buy the caliber of players and aiming to recruit the caliber of coaches who are further up the table with European pedigree and you're aiming more for the mid-table top half end of things. Yeah, you might get a couple of things wrong. You might have injuries or what have you through the season that go against you. But you're far more likely to survive if you're looking to be progressive rather than just, reactive to what's going on and trying to scrape by. So it's just, obviously I know nothing about this coach, whether he's any good, but yeah, pedigree's there. And again, it's another signal that everything behind the scenes at the club is healthy and in a good order, which I think is just brilliant.
Just finally on first team transfers anyways, there was a rumour that I think Matisse Ablin, we'd had a bid rejected for him. Also apparently tracking Djordje's Mikwatadze, think that's how you say it. Probably have butchered that one. But a few stories coming out today in the Italian press about that one, and there was a quote from Corriere dello Sport.it where they said, Djordje's Mikwatadze, I hope I've got that right, it's a hard one to say, is priority, but initial contacts were by former director of football Florent Ghisolfi, who is now competing with his old club for the striker. Unlike Rome, Sunderland have no financial fair play fears. So there's one to keep your eye on. Somebody who's obviously coveted.
And yet again, by the way, names that we've apparently been looking at for a while to fit in with what we were saying before. You know, people who apparently have been on the radar for a long time, particularly Ableen.
Yeah, I think it's clear to see, isn't it? You know, we've talked about, and I said this before, so I'm just repeating myself. But a centre mid, a goalkeeper, and a striker. That's the spine of your team. We're definitely spending money, big money, on a striker and a keeper, whether it's Petrovic and whoever else. You know what I mean? We're going to do it. So, you know, I can tell you by, you know, the weekend, there'll be other names. There'll be more things further down the line. I think, to be honest, with pre-season starting on Friday, there's going to be a desire from the club to get those big out the way, I think, because we've still got 2 months pretty much of the window. So, you know, get your big signings in early doors, set your stall out. It also signals the club's ambition for the rest of the window, helps you get other players through the door. You can totally understand what's going on.
Speaking of goalkeepers, Gav, I can't believe you're not giving any column inches to Nathan Bishop going to AFC Wimbledon.
I mentioned it yesterday on the pod with. Okay. So if you've been listening, you would have heard it.
I've not caught up.
Boo. Yeah, he left. That was something we briefly touched on that pod, to be honest, about the outgoings. We're talking all about incomings. There's about, I think he reeled off 18 players who we're probably looking at leaving. We're going to have a big squad return for pre-season training on Friday, so that one should be interesting. The other incoming, which is slightly less notable, but certainly worth mentioning, Matty Burns has signed, and he's signed as a youth player in from Coleraine in Northern Ireland. He's actually played first-team football for them and was announced as part of the Scholars Group, and Coleraine have made a massive deal of him coming here. They've posted photos of him and his family at the Academy of Light holding the shirt. The manager's done a bit of a piece just praising him for his development, and so Coleraine are really proud of that one. So I'm interested to keep an eye on that. And you know, I think we did it last year with Reece Walsh as well, who's played for the under-21. So you know, we are always looking at that market. Trey Hume obviously being a shining. Trey Hume is the shining example of lads from Northern Ireland and from the Republic. Actually, you know, Sunderland are bringing lads over from those leagues, getting them into the system, and well, he was our player of the season last year. There's no better example, is there? So not really much else we can say about that one, but certainly, you know, worth mentioning. And before we sign off, away kit release day, or at least we're going to see the away kit on Friday, which I thought was worth a little mention at the end of this. Who's buying it? We've already seen it. However.
I was going to say, we're going to see for the first time eyes if none of us saw the links that went out a couple of weeks ago. But if it is that kit, then it's a beauty, and I'll definitely be buying it.
Same.
Yeah.
Same. Yeah. I've got fully on board with buying kits. I haven't bought one for years and years and years. But after last year, I'm fully on board with it now.
That's me and all. Bomber. I was always like one of these who took the piss out of people for wearing them. Now you kind of get off me back. I'm going to take a second skin. I'm turning into a mag.
Actually, no one can see us on this call, but the three things in the screen we're wearing white, black, white. So we actually do look like mags as well. So we need here to try.
And my dogs are lying on the bed behind us. Can't see.
We need to break up this monotony here, lads. So get the kit out, and we'll all wear it for the pod recordings, shall we?
I'll buy a couple of red and white tops for me dogs and all to hide the fact they're black and white. So yeah, I think that's everything for this evening, gents. And I guarantee you that by the time that this drops at 6:00 on Thursday morning, we will have plenty of other things to talk about. So we're going to just keep these update pods coming right through the summer. I think, you know, they're going down well as well. It's funny, you know, people, whenever a bit of news drops, we're just getting tagged on every social media platform. So, get a podcast out. So there's going to be loads to react to. And as I mentioned earlier on, we've got a couple of podcasts already lined up with experts, people who know who these players are that we're actually signing. I'll be speaking to Elijah Michaels, who is a video scout who specialises in Belgian football. So that should be interesting. He's going to tell us all about Noah Sadiki, and I'll be chatting to him. So that'll be coming out at some point over the week. We've got all sorts of other things planned, top 10s on this week's interviews with players. We're actually holding things back just because of the sheer amount of news which is going on. And hopefully an ex-player interview, which we've been trying to arrange for ages, will be recorded at some point next week. So loads to look forward to. We are a daily podcast, sometimes twice daily if the news drops, reacting to things and stuff like that. So make sure you get subscribed to Howie the Podcast. We are going nowhere over the summer. We're keeping you lot supplied with your poddy goodness. That just leaves me to say thank you very much, Bomber. Been great.
Thank you very much, Gav. Cheers, buddy.
Thank you very much, Johnny.
Thank you very much. Pleasure as always.
Yes, and thank you to the listeners. Make sure you catch up with us again tomorrow. We'll see you then.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.